Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Because I can't see some of you out there in the dark. I'm Bill Brown, UNLV Director of Brookings Mountain West. So thank you all for coming. Today you are truly all special guests, but some of you are more special than others. So I want to say a special thank you to Karen Danielson Lang and her son Aiden and the rest of the Lang family that was able to join us in person today. Which reminds me to say that we are webcasting this event live for many of Rob's family, friends, and colleagues who couldn't physically be with us. We'll also are recording the event, so it'll be up on our website in a few days if you have friends and colleagues who you know would want to take a look at it. I have a little housekeeping to do. You'll see by our program, we don't go in for lengthy introductions and tributes here. We'll just invite our speakers up one after the other to give their remarks. And our good friend, Michael Brown, emailed us yesterday to say he had finally tested positive for COVID. So he can't be with us today. So we'll just go from Chris Nelson to Maureen Schaefer when we get to that point. We do have one speaker, a colleague, an academic colleague of Rob's who recorded his remarks. So right after John Hudak speaks, Bill Rowey's remarks, the curtain behind me will magically open and we'll listen to some recorded remarks and then it will close and we'll pick right back up. Other than that, the program is pretty straightforward. I just want to make a few opening remarks. One thing is I want to remember to do is thank our friends at the Regional Transportation Commission. If you haven't had a chance, right across the street at the Transportation Center, they have planted a tree and put a plaque in place dedicated to Rob for all his work in the transportation arena. There's also a bench there dedicated to the Lang family. So if after this event or anytime you're on campus by there, please do stop and take a look. And now as to why we're here, and by here I mean physically in this place. As many of you know, we've tried to have this event for the last just over a year, and it's been obviously physically impossible to get together until now. And there was talk about, could we do something outside? Could we do something in a bigger place where we could be socially distanced? And in keeping with Rob's wishes, because he and I and others had long talks about this event, I'm sure you're all shocked to know that Rob had some ideas about how this event should go on. And he wanted to meet in this building for a couple of really important reasons. One is he was so proud that the two centers he ran are in a building that bears the Greenspun family name. And that says a lot. The other reason is he hoped we could spend some time, particularly in this room, since although it's been 2.5 years since we had an event, a public event here, which is shocking to me, even after all this time. But so much of our public work took place here. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Because it was almost 13 years ago to the day that the university and Brookings held an announcement in this lobby, followed up by an event in this room. And I know that Brian and Myra Greenspun were here. I don't know if any of the rest of you happen to be, but it was an event and it was announced on a rather innocuous little postcard, and it reads, "The University of Nevada, Las Vegas and the Brookings Institution are pleased to invite you to join us for an announcement of a significant joint initiative." And that initiative turned out to be Brookings Mountain West. I think we might add significant joint initiative to our logo. I just like the sound, unless our new Cannabis Institute wants to take that title. I'm sorry, but John Hudak bet me $20 that I wouldn't say that, so I had to. So that's why we're here. Some of you may know that our offices are up on the second floor of this building. So the building, the lobby, this room are all second homes to us. You're going to have a lot of speakers today who are going to talk about Rob and have memories and stories. I'm going to take this opportunity to just give you some numbers, because it wouldn't be a Brookings Mountain West event if we didn't provide some data and information. So bear with me. This little experiment, as Rob and I referred to Brookings Mountain West on occasions, thanks to our Brookings colleagues, who we appreciate making the trip out here. In the time Rob was executive director, we hosted 145 individual visits from more than 70 Brookings scholars. And among the things they did while they were here is offer 115 public lectures, which you can still see on YouTube and public television on occasion. Some of them are even more timely than they were when they were first offered. Those scholars also made over 550 classroom presentations, but of equal importance, they've mentored UNLV students, whether it was career advice, graduate school, what life is like in a think tank. They, of course, talked to the media extensively while they were here about their research interests and how it relates to Las Vegas and Nevada and the Mountain West. They also engaged with appropriate players in our community, if it was the business community or political and office holders or appointed office holders, the education community, whatever it might be. We've really worked to engage ourselves in all aspects of life here. So that's the Brookings side of things. When we weren't working with our Brookings colleagues, under Rob's leadership, we produced 265 publications, if we added correctly. That includes 2 books, 75 policy papers and white papers, another 175 or so fact sheets and other works, which have had about 50,000 downloads for our global audience. And as I mentioned, we held 35 different public forums, community forums in this room. This is where we first talked about our economic development plan to help the state recover from the Great Recession back in 2009 and 10. It's where we first talked about the need for the creation of Interstate 11 connecting Phoenix and Las Vegas. It's where we first talked about the essential need to have an R1 university in this metro region. You can check the boxes on all those 3 things. It's also where we first presented, and I know Barbara, you'll remember this, it's seared into my memory, where we first presented the economic plan to justify the UNLV Medical School. And if I have one too many chocolate chip cookies out there, I'll tell you some of the stories behind that. And we're going to continue with that tradition next month, a little commercial. We'll be releasing a study with the same consultant we worked with on the med school to show the economic and societal benefits of having a UNLV academic health center that brings together all the related health services and issues that this region needs. So I please invite you to join us for that. And all this work led to more than 800 media stories, largely featuring Rob, talking about our work or the important issue of the day. And I also don't want to forget to mention our students, which was always foremost in Rob's mind. A few years ago, we started a program called the Brookings Public Policy Minor, which is a series of courses that are led by UNLV faculty, but Brookings colleagues guest lecture physically or virtually and make use of many of Brookings publications and resources. We've already graduated 25 students from that program. Some of them are in this audience, some of them are about to graduate and receive the minor, are here. A number of them are watching us because they've moved on to some of the finest public policy schools, law schools, business schools in the country. Some of them are working at an unnamed think tank in Washington, D.C., and other think tanks in Washington, D.C. We couldn't be prouder of them. And this is not something that was on our radar when we started Brookings Mountain West, but the response to having Brookings Scholars here on campus from students and faculty was such that it seemed like something we just had to do, and why didn't we do it sooner? So we have another 50 or 75 students working their way through the program, more each semester. I wish I could take credit for some of that, but it's really the work of my colleagues here at Brookings that I'll mention soon. The numbers aren't everything, of course. And in the 12 years that I had the privilege of working with Rob, we've had a lot of people come through our corridor, so to speak, our second floor hallway. Staff and faculty, I saw Alex Nikolic here. Alex was a critical member of our staff early on. She's gone on to bigger and better things at UNLV. At least that's what she tells me. And I just want to send a personal word out to our current staff, my colleagues, Caitlin Saladino, Ashley LeClaire, Magdalena Martinez, Fatma Nazos, Kellyanne Beavers, who are the best people you could hope to work with and have helped me beyond what's reasonably expected deal with the last couple of years as we dealt with Rob's passing on top of COVID, on top of changing how we work. And I just couldn't be prouder or more grateful to them. It's been the highlight of my academic career to work with Rob at Brookings Mountain West. The only thing I truly value anymore is that I could call him my friend. And we miss him. And I'm going to stop talking now because I don't think I can go on anymore. And if I could invite UNLV President Keith Whitfield up to be our next speaker, we'll continue.
Well, good afternoon. You know, it's so interesting. We did have some spits and sputters trying to hold this event. But when it came onto my calendar again, and it was the Rob Lang Celebration of Life, I thought that that was so appropriate. I've not been here for too long, but one of the first things I did as president is that I heard about Brookings Mountain West and the Lincy Institute and this guy named Rob Lang. And actually, as I researched this university, Rob's name comes up quite frequently. And while I didn't get a chance to spend a lot of time with him, I want to believe maybe it's my background as a psychologist, maybe it's as a military brat where you move around and you just get a sense of people. I always allow myself to be open to learn more, but usually my first gut response is right. I got a chance to come over and I got a chance to meet Rob. And from his reputation, you would have thought that he was like 7 feet tall and he had these, because people would just talk about him with such, that he had such presence. And when I met him, I understood why. Like I said, I didn't get a chance to get to know him well, but we exchanged lots of emails. I'd asked him several favors, and he followed through with every single one of them. And I understood why he had the reputation that he had. But to me, I really connected with who he was, who I thought as a person. And that's that, one, he had a love for this university. He had a love for Southern Nevada. He had a love for what he did. And that came through in absolute aces. You know, I do know that his contributions to UNLV and to Southern Nevada were vast. And we're all better as a result of his presence on our campus and in our community. I've learned that there were very few, if any, who have worked as hard as he did to advocate for the economic potential of Southern Nevada and in the incredibly important role that UNLV plays in its success. Through his work with Brookings Mountain West and the Lincy Institute, he introduced the nation's top policy minds to UNLV and to Southern Nevada, forging strong connections that have benefited our region's growth and development. I must tell you, I know lots feel this way, but personally, I just do feel that I wish he was still here. There's a lot of challenges that we still face, and the wisdom, the strength, the courage, words of wisdom, all have benefited us, and I wish we still had them here today. But what I do know that we can benefit from is the nearly, it must be thousands of policy briefs that he contributed to, that I have a small library of those email messages that had these different briefs. And I do use them to try to educate myself, and I would hope that others feel like, well, he's on top of things. And I think it's because I read a lot of what Rob wrote. And you know, when I think about many of the signature moments that I've read about, that I've heard about in Las Vegas over the last 10 years, a new medical school for UNLV, improved transportation connections for Las Vegas and the Southwest, and a new sports stadium, and more, Rob's name comes up every single time. His impact will not be forgotten. He was a go-to source for business leaders, policymakers, and the media on the rapid growth of the American Southwest and Las Vegas in particular. And what I appreciated about him for UNLV, he was our guy. You know, this is Vegas, you gotta have a guy. And Rob was certainly that guy. I also understand that as a teacher and a mentor, he was a champion for our students, giving them a once-in-a-lifetime set of opportunities to share their research globally. Dr. Lang will be sorely missed, but his legacy will endure through his family, including his wife Karen, their son Aiden, and through the countless students, faculty that he mentored and inspired. And I can tell you that he will also live in my mind and in my heart about how you care for and love a university and love an area and love the people and want what's best for them. So for that, just want to send out and say thank you, Rob. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, President Whitfield, and thank you, Bill. I'm really grateful to be here for this important celebration, and to be with you, Karen, and to be with you, Aiden, because I want to share with you why Robert Lang means so much to Brookings and to me. And I know many of you are very familiar, as you've heard, that Brookings Mountain West launched in 2009, thanks to Rob's leadership. But I want you to also know that Rob's history with Brookings and with me dates back much, much earlier. And in fact, Rob Lang's professional journey and accomplishments over 2 decades were highly defined and intertwined with that of Brookings. Now, as context, I don't know if you all know me, but I am Amy Liu, and I've been at Brookings for over 25 years. And when I came to Brookings, I co-created with Bruce Katz, who some of you know, a program at Brookings dedicated to cities and metropolitan areas. Over time, I became its director and a vice president at Brookings. And today, I'm pleased to serve as the institution's interim president. And so I want to share with you Rob's presence, his long time working side by side with Brookings, not just for the Metro program, but for the entire institution. And I hope that you'll hear soon how impactful he was as a force to the institution. And I hope in turn that we helped Rob be the influential leader that he became. So I want to talk about 3 phases of Rob's journey over the last 25 years. I'm going to start with the founding of Brookings Metro. I first met Rob in 1996. 1996. And Rob was a research director at the time at the Fannie Mae Foundation. And the foundation was chaired by Jim Johnson, who was CEO of Fannie Mae, and he was chair of the Brookings Board of Trustees. And Jim had a vision that he wanted to create a center dedicated to cities and urban policy at Brookings. And he had that vision, and the institution supported it, and it is one of the reasons why Bruce and I ended up at Brookings. But I think what's important here to understand is that Jim was smart enough to assign his first big gift from the foundation, because the foundation actually gave the Institute Brookings 5 years worth of funding to start the center and get it started and support it and get it sustained. And Jim was smart enough to assign Rob Lang to be the person to work with me and Bruce to frame and set up and do amazing things at Brookings. And I will always remember sitting across a little desk in the Fannie Mae Foundation, meeting with Rob Lang all the time. And I think what was so exciting about that moment, and I don't think Jim even knew this, that by doing that, he had sparked a partnership that was going to last. And Rob was the perfect partner, because Fannie Mae was very much dedicated to housing and affordability and community development. But the vision we had at Brookings and with Rob was to create a center that had an affirmative vision for cities, that wanted to redefine how people perceived places as places of deficit, but as in places of opportunity. And as you'll hear from a theme over and over, and as you all know Rob, is the power of the work we did and the work he did was to challenge conventional wisdom, use evidence and stories and real-world experiences to tell people there is actually a different narrative grounded in reality that can really change not just hearts and minds, but policies and practices. That was Rob. He was our partner. Phase 2, Rob then left Fannie Mae to create a program at Virginia Tech University. And it was the first time Virginia Tech, and Chris Nelson's here and was part of that story. It's the first time Virginia Tech realized the power of a focus on cities. And they picked the right person. And it was at that point, Rob began to exercise his thought leadership, his voice, his vision about the future of metropolitan America. And in that place, he published Edgeless Cities, Bloomberg's Megapolitan America, Blue Metros, Red States. All of these were Brookings publications, because I failed to mention when he went to Virginia Tech, we made him a non-resident fellow at Brookings. And so he published all of that work through Brookings and working in partnership with a lot of us. And it was so exciting to see him chart some really pivotal work. And you know it, the way he did it, oh my gosh, larger than life. He made every room wake up. I think he literally made urban policy fun and sexy, because he was funny, he had these great stories. We often talked about him as the urban stand-up comic show. He was a show. He was entertaining, he was engaging, and he made people engage in the content. And it made people love the topic, all while reminding people that cities and suburbs were really different than what they thought before and had a different possibility. And he then took that experience and what he learned and his passion, and he brought it to Southern Nevada. And it was wonderful that UNLV understood the importance of this agenda. And when he came to UNLV, you've already heard from Bill, one of the first things we decided to do was to create Brookings Mountain West. And I went back and took a look at all the founding documents, and it was so interesting. It was Rob Lang and Mark Miro launching, it was director at the time, launching some efforts. And yet what was really exciting about this was that Rob used this opportunity not only to apply what he did to practical reality to this community, he also extended his expertise and his platform to the wider Brookings community. And so there were three parts to the founding of Brookings Mountain West. It was one, we were going to do mountain megas. And for those who remember mountain megas, we were going to talk about the importance of the Vegas region alongside rising important places like Denver, Phoenix, Salt Lake, and others, and to put this region on the map. And as part of that, we also decided to enter and work with Governor Sandoval at the time around a new vision for Nevada to diversify its economy and strengthen opportunity here. That was one part of the Brookings Mountain West. The second part was bringing the rest of Brookings, 5 programs and its scholarship, local, economic, governance, foreign policy, global development, to this community. And we're lucky that John Hudak, Richard Reeves, and others are here who embody the spirit of that partnership. And the third piece was commissioned research, other scholars besides Brookings Metro helping to solve problems that are relevant to this community. And those 3 things in general still stands today. And I will just say, I am so impressed with what he has been able to do during this time and the partnership that we had. So if you think about that journey, in 25 years, Rob was pivotal to helping to launch an impactful local and state program at Brookings. He then took that and reframed in his own words how leaders around the country should reimagine future of cities and metros. And then he applied all that passion and evidence to what became his new hometown, Southern Nevada and Greater Vegas. So Aiden, Karen, I think you know that your dad led a really meaningful and accomplished life. He made a difference to a lot of people. And as President Whitfield said, the work is unfinished. And I think it's so great that one of the things you all are doing is so appropriate, is that there is a fellowship now that has been created to continue Robert Lang's legacy on a topic for which he dedicated his entire life towards, his passion for the future of urban and metropolitan policy. And in David and in the students and in this new president, which I'm very excited about, I think this institute and the university is going to continue to do great things. And so, Karen and Aiden, thank you for sharing Rob and being his supporter and his partner. Because of that partnership, he was able to bring his love to everyone. So thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you all for being here. One ground rule before I get started. Anything I say that's remotely funny, you have to laugh. Because that's the only way I'm going to get through this, okay? So we got a deal? I'm going to hold you to it, all right? Because you don't want to see me sobbing and blubbering up here. Nobody wants that. All right. So I know this is a event built to celebration of life. Our loss is enormous. Right? For me, not an hour goes by I don't think about Rob. Remember a conversation we had, or laugh out loud, recalling all that good trouble he loved to stir up. Hit and run road trips to the legislature, and I'm talking in the car, taking the long way. Vegas to Carson City by way of Lincoln County through the extraterrestrial highway. He had his reasons for that. Creating a mascot, as well as writing and performing a fight song for Enchi. That happened. I don't know if there's video, but it happened. And of course, his stock in trade, incendiary op-eds to keep the pot boiling. He was mau-mauing, one of his favorite terms, employing guerrilla tactics to undermine the Nevada establishment. I'll let that one sink in for a minute. Since my appointment as interim executive director, I'm reminded daily of the breadth and depth of Rob's engagement in Southern Nevada and the imprint he left on so many people. Reflecting the tributes that came in as news of his death spread, Bill mentioned the RTC dedication across the way, and you, the audience gathered here today. Representatives from government, Southern Nevada's business, nonprofit, and philanthropic communities, colleagues from across UNLV, Brookings, and prior academic postings. What I've also come to appreciate is everyone has a Rob Lang story. So here's mine. Fall 2010, upstairs, Rob's office in the suite. Bill had invited me to participate in the Brookings Mountain event that led ultimately to the Brookings Press book, America's New Swing Region. Ahead of the event, I was to meet with Rob. I figured we would discuss event logistics, programming, that sort of thing. That's not how it went down. After a minute or so of small talk, the meeting was dominated by one voice. Needless to say, it was not mine. I'm not sure how long it lasted, but Rob unleashed what I would come to recognize as a trademark rap/riff/rant, full-throated truth bomb. If you were ever in the room for one of these, you would not forget it. Later, when I knew these were coming, I would love to sit back and watch people's faces, the shock and awe as this just kept on coming. When is it gonna stop? When is it gonna stop? What he gave to me in that, 20, 25-minute rant was deftly weave together maybe a half dozen or so threads to lay out where Southern Nevada stood coming out of the Great Recession, how its recovery was faring compared to its Mountain West competitors, the infrastructure assets that the region was missing, how we were getting screwed in federal, state, and local dollars, and the policy interventions needed to fix Las Vegas's deficits and holes in hopes, in Rob's words, of someday becoming a grown-up metro. I didn't realize in the moment, but my career path was about to take a big detour. From College of Liberal Arts tenured faculty to the worlds of Brookings, Brookings Mountain West, and the Lincy Institute. For the next decade, I watched, learned from, and collaborated with Rob as he worked to realize that vision he laid out in his office that afternoon and change the trajectory of Southern Nevada. Rob's academic chops were the product of Rutgers. I can safely say they don't teach Rob skills in graduate school. Rather, Rob's talent and tenacity were honed in the streets of New York and New Jersey and the Washington offices of Fannie Mae and Brookings. He brought to Southern Nevada a powerful combination of East Coast urbanity, scrappy back alley brawler, and performance artist that was an unapologetic affront to the one Nevada consensus-based politics that had served our region so poorly for so long. So how did he do it? There are four essential elements to Rob's social science and approach to applied public policy. An otherworldly understanding how spatial and geographic relations condition population characteristics, voting patterns, policy priorities, and economic opportunities. The last two projects we work on exemplify this mindset. Blue Metro's Red States, a classic Rob Lang title. The final draft of that book was finished during the early days of the lockdown, stuck in our homes, unsure of what was going to happen next, working nonstop so the Brookings Press could publish in time for the 2020 election. This was also my first opportunity to co-author with both Rob and Karen. The experience offered me some insight into their relationship and partnership. I can safely say that Rob's bark's not so sharp in Karen's presence, and Karen is the only co-author who's successfully able to dial back Rob's self-citations. The second is the Three Nevadas framework used in our post-pandemic policy report. At Rob's insistence, the cover features Michael Brown's favorite map in the whole world, illustrating the state's economic development geography at the megapolitan level. And thank you to Jaywan for all your handiwork. And how many drafts of this we go through? A lot, but thank you. Issue framing. Rob masterfully distilled theories and data to define Las Vegas's policy challenges and opportunities. If academic medicine as a means to improve the region's health outcomes isn't moving the needle, then frame it as an engine of economic opportunity. Demonstrate proof of concept to skeptical audiences by drawing from an endless reservoir of examples. I can't recall how many development corporation examples were sent to the governor's office before the med school project was greenlighted. Quite a few, huh, Maureen? Rob knew them all, and it was what moved the needle and got the medical school building moving. Obviously, any public policy scholar can tell you how to make the world better. Rob understood the real work was forging the coalitions to effectuate change. One of the first projects Lincy commissioned was a network analysis of Southern Nevada's nonprofits. This provided Rob with insights into regional partnerships and fault lines that allowed him to effectively navigate interests to deliver the outcomes. Undergirding Rob's methods and ethos was an unquenchable thirst for knowledge, and to put it politely, a disposition for dissonance and disruption. Rob was a relentless seeker of information. Because he was so ecumenical in his sources, he could hold forth on most any topic. In the rare instances that he didn't know something, very rare, he knew who to ask or where to find the information. It was not uncommon to wake to emails and texts with highlights from whatever rabbit hole he had gone down in the middle of the night. This foraging was then followed by lengthy debriefings. My time's up. So Rob could verbally integrate these newly acquired nuggets into his worldview. Process, repeat. Those he clashed with sought to dismiss Rob as a wild man, a smug Easterner, a college professor running his mouth in the media. Where's Brian? And thank you, Brian, for providing that platform. Such characterizations are not really accurate. First of all, Bill's the one who runs hot. People do not believe it when I tell them that in the shops, Rob's was the voice of moderation and optimism. Secondly, when Rob stepped in the public square, he did so with purpose. His mantra was always punch up, and boy did he. No enabler of Nevada's status quo was safe, and not all those who drew Rob's righteous wrath lived in the North. Pushback from the real Nevadans whose cages Rob rattled could be intense. On some days, friends were few and far between. Relationships strained, if not severed. To give you some idea, consider, Rob was accused of conducting illegal research for commissioning an analysis of the economic development potential of academic medicine in Southern Nevada. Even after he was hired, calls were made to prior institutions seeking verification of his credentials. There were some who couldn't believe that a person like Rob existed, let alone that he was operating in Nevada and messing with their state. Not so subtle pressure was exerted on the 7th floor in hopes of reining him in, or better yet, getting him the hell out of Nevada. Failing this, another UNLV presidential search was sure to follow. Unflattering stories and op-eds appeared in the Northern Nevada media. Although, to be fair, Rob reveled in this. In his estimation, if people wearing cowboy hats and bolo ties were yelling about him, that was evidence of his effectiveness. In those moments, it also became clear why Lindy and Rob created Lincy and Brookings West as independent entities, insulated from outside interference. The executive director has 2 reporting lines, one to the president of Brookings, one to the president of UNLV. This structure allowed Rob to keep pushing his agenda regardless of the headwinds. Did Rob win every fight? No. The last I checked, there's no light rail running down Maryland Parkway. The regents remain in the state constitution, and community colleges are not locally governed. but as speakers who follow will attest, his fingerprints are on so many initiatives that are shaping Southern Nevada in ways we've yet to fully appreciate. Reforming how Nevada does economic development, alleviating some of Southern Nevada's infrastructure and asset deficits, including the R1 and land grant pushes at UNLV, Interstate 11, Project Neon, Allegiant Stadium, Apex, and the list goes on. Creating regional and policy and planning consciousness through the establishment of Southern Nevada Strong and the Southern Nevada Forum. The UNLV School of Medicine, now the Kirk Kerkorian School of Medicine, and the Nevada Health and Bioscience Corporation, created to oversee the planning and construction of the medical education building, establishing, as Rob predicted, the model for future public-private partnerships. Indeed, because of Maureen's leadership in delivering that project ahead of schedule and under budget, the Development Corporation is managing the recently announced ambulatory care facility and public health lab. But ultimately, Rob's most significant contribution is the human capital he seeded. It's this capital that continues the work he began. A moment ago, I mentioned Rob's unsiloed pursuit of knowledge. This extended the team he built at Lincy and Brookings Mountain West. None of us hold degrees in the same fields. We all have different areas of expertise and come from different colleges and units. It's unlikely any of us would even know each other, much less passionately collaborate on a range of projects except for Rob. Through the Brookings Public Policy minor, internships with Brookings, and research opportunities, there's a growing cadre of UNLV graduates strengthening and diversifying the public policy pipeline. Program alumni have gone on to top law schools, graduate programs, are working in think tanks, policy shops, in government, and public affairs, spreading the gospel of Lincy and Brookings Mountain West wherever they go. Then to the graduate students he mentored. First at Virginia Tech and then at UNLV. Caitlin and Kellyanne here, as well as Ryan Juden, completed dissertations, and I think what might be best thought of as Rob Lang studies. We are not done, however. To nurture the next generation of Rob Langs, thanks to some very generous founding gifts, this spring we'll be awarding the inaugural Robert E. Lang Memorial Fellowship to annually support a UNLV Ph.D. student who's completing a dissertation in urban public policy. If you want to recognize Rob's contributions to Southern Nevada and support Rob's legacy, there's no better way than making a gift to the fellowship. Thank you. And now, it's my great pleasure to bring to the mic someone who's no stranger to Las Vegas. This is what, your 734th trip here? The biggest Golden Knights fan in the Washington Metro, my friend and colleague, John Hudak.
Well, Karen and Aidan, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. In a lot of ways, none of us want to be here. In a lot of ways, Rob still lives strong in our hearts. He lives strong in this building. The Greenspun name rightfully is on the outside of the building, but the Lang name will forever live in the soul of this building. As the previous speakers have mentioned, Rob was a transformative figure anywhere he went. I think for a lot of us, we think of Rob Lang as someone who transformed policy and a variety of other areas of life in Southern Nevada, but Rob's fingerprints are all over the United States. The work that he did here extended elsewhere, throughout the country, around the world. He was proud of his achievements without being a proud person. And I learned a ton from Rob Lang. I started coming out here as part of our partnership 10 years ago. It'll be 10 years next month. And I was new to Brookings, had a little less gray in my beard, and I had no idea what to expect. And Bill picked me up from the airport. We had a, pleasant conversation as you would with a stranger. And I thought, okay, this is a demure kind of person. I disagree a bit with Dave. Bill is not a fiery individual on the outside, passionate on the inside, not so fiery on the outside. And I thought, okay, For someone who suffers mightily from imposter syndrome, I had no idea what to expect from this trip. I felt like I didn't belong here. I had research to present that I was worried might not connect, but so I came. And Bill, as I said, Bill picked me up and I felt at home. He's a fellow New Englander. While I'm a little more fiery on the outside than Bill, it felt like a calm presence. And then I arrived to this building. And then I met Rob, who, in fairness, I'm kind of angry with Bill. He didn't quite prepare me for what to expect. Now, granted, God only knows who could possibly prepare someone to meet Rob Lang. And so my experiences with Rob were all, from the first one to my last one, was always that I felt like when you had a conversation with Rob, he started in the middle of the conversation. Like for me, I have a little bit of a wind up when I'm having a conversation with people, and then you know. But no, Rob, from the word go, was at an 11. On a scale of 1 to 2, Rob was at an 11. And intimidating in a sort of good way, terrifying, as I mean, I was terrified, honest to God. My first time meeting Rob, I was terrified as hell. I can't imagine what, the Board of Regents or rural legislators thought of Rob, but I was quite terrified. And again, as I said, he was a true force of nature and a force of nature for the good, for the best. Because at his heart, with the passion, with sometimes the anger, he wanted to make better any community he lived in, any community that he researched, in any community that he felt he was a part of. And, I tell people a lot that Brookings has an office in Las Vegas, and most people ask, why the hell does Brookings have an office in Las Vegas? And I actually think that question pissed Rob Lang off more than anything else. Because to Rob, it was so sensible that we would have an office in Las Vegas. When we started this partnership, the United States was, at least to that time, in the deepest recession since the Great Depression. This metropolitan area suffered more by almost any metric, more than any other metropolitan region in the country. And so it, of course, made sense to Rob to bring his talents, to bring his knowledge, to bring his vision, to bring his advocacy to the community that needed it the most. Now, in a community that gambles a lot, I don't know if Las Vegas knew the gamble they were making with Rob. And that force led to change that I think Rob could not have even imagined in 2009. And the previous speakers have talked about a lot of those transformations, a change to transportation policy, the establishment of a medical school, which Maureen's going to talk earlier. That was a hell of a fight. In this room alone, it was a hell of a fight. Outside of the room, it was one as well. Transforming economic development across the partisanship of governors, Democrats and Republicans, wanting to make this city and this community a better place, elevating UNLV to be a Research One university, which of all of the accomplishments, of all of the achievements, and one of the last conversations I had with Rob was about that precisely. There was so much passion and fire and pride, not in his work, but pride in what the faculty and the leadership and the students of this university did to make it recognized as a Research One university. And it was a years-long vision for him, and he was able to achieve it. I love that he was able to see it. Faculty members like Karen are the reason why UNLV ranks among the top universities in the country in terms of the quality and the impact of its research. So that's the policy and academic side of Rob. So let me talk a little bit about the personal side of Rob. I study the presidency. One of the hats I wear is studying the presidency. And one of the things that you read about if you're studying presidential history is the personal charisma of presidents. And Lyndon Johnson had a heck of a personal charisma. When he was Senate Majority Leader and as president as well, he was notorious for the Lyndon lean. Now, Lyndon Johnson was about 25 feet taller than I am, and so anyone he was trying to pressure into something, he would lord over them in a really significant way. And it was effective. He was a very effective Senate Majority Leader. He was a very effective president. So there was the Lyndon lean, and I think the parallel was the Rob rant. And I would literally walk into his office. I felt, as I said, he started every conversation midway through, I swear, and I always felt like I was interrupting him. Like I walked, like I waded into a tsunami. And he would go off, and in the process, I would learn so much. I learned that there was a North-South divide in Nevada, which was second only to the Civil War in the United States. I learned so much about the fights within the community, within the state, within the university that needed an advocate. And it wasn't just that Rob Lang was that advocate. It was the faculty who were affiliated with Lincy and with Brookings Mountain West, the students who studied under him or studied near him, who had that impact on the community. He was entirely committed to as I said earlier, the trajectory of this university, to students, to those who were underprivileged, who didn't have a voice in this community. And for those of you who have lived here for a long time, you know there are a hell of a lot of people in this community who are voiceless. And Rob wanted to give them a voice and make their lives better. It was not about serving elites. It was not about rocking the boat, though he loved rocking the boat. But it was always in the service of people who did not have the voice or the microphone or the podium or the connection to media that he had. That's remarkable. When we think about advocacy in this country, there is typically a selfishness in advocacy. But for Rob Lang, there was a selflessness in advocacy. That was the thing I loved most about him. And as I said, I'm here, I love that Amy is here as our president to represent the institution and our scholars. And I speak on behalf of a lot of scholars who have been out here. Many still at Brookings, some who have moved on, who have learned so much, not from our partnership, but from Rob and the talented people who Rob hired and worked with and mentored and taught. One of the things that Rob would always remind me of, and I'm sure this is not going to fall on new ears in this room, was that the Nevada legislature only works for 180 days every 2 years. I feel like Rob Lang worked 2 years every 180 days. That he fit so much into a life that was cut short is a remarkable testament to an incredible man. And I will say the only thing that Rob cared more for other than his research and his advocacy and his community and the students was his family. And I never had a conversation with Rob where he didn't talk about how proud he was of Karen, how proud he was of Aiden. It was a nice change from the rant about whatever was happening in Nevada that he finally calmed down. Like, I mean, Karen and Aiden are great people. They were like the Xanax in a Rob conversation. They brought the temperature down, they brought the anxiety level down a lot, and he made sure he talked about them with more pride than anything else in his life. Xanax and Scotch, Karen's right. That is right. And so, you know, I'm going to close by saying that I'm grateful to, in partnership with Amy, to represent the Brookings Institution and the many scholars who Rob has touched. As I said, I've learned a lot from him. Nevada is my home away from home. This is my 44th trip in less than 10 years. It is a place that initially I thought was just going to be a one-off research junket for me to talk about federal funding. And as one of our previous speakers said, what transformed into my forced understanding by Rob about how little federal funding flows to Nevada despite the needs and the representation of the state. But it turned into a love for this community because I learned that love from Rob. And, you know, I was at a wedding a couple of weeks ago. I promise I'll close on this and turn it over. But I was at a wedding a couple of weeks ago, and the minister who was doing the wedding said something that I'd never heard at a wedding before, but it was so meaningful. And he said to the bride and groom during the ceremony, "This is an assembly of people who are here because of you too. And this group of people will never come together again, likely. And it should signal to you the love that you have as a couple, the love that you have as individuals." And that's true of this room today, the people watching on YouTube, the people who will view this later on. The only reason we are all in this room is because of Rob Lang. It's a remarkable conglomeration of great minds and passionate people and great philanthropists and others who care not just about Southern Nevada, but about improving the lives of others. And so what I will say is, it is my honor to be here, but as you look around the room, recognize there is one man who is responsible for not just the improvement and better policy and a lot of fights in Nevada, but there's one man who's responsible for us being here. And my only regret is that he's not here to share it with us. And so, Bill, I think there's a video, the curtains are going to spread, but Aiden, Karen, thank you so much for the invitation today. It is a mighty loss for all of us, a mightier loss for you, and it has truly been my pleasure.
Hello, I'm Professor Bill Rowe from the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. I am happy to be joining everyone this afternoon in honoring the life and work of Robert Lang, who I knew as a colleague and friend for 25 years. I first met Rob in 1996 when he joined Karen as an associate editor of Housing Policy Debate, originally published by the now defunct Fannie Mae Foundation. 2 short years later, Rob was promoted to senior editor of the journal and worked to make it one of the leading journals in the housing and community development field. About that time, I became an associate editor, and we worked closely together for the next 10 years. In my first meeting with Rob, I was bowled over by his energy, his enthusiasm, his openness, his sense of humor, and by how fast he could talk. Now, I have had many colleagues in my career, but only a handful of those do I call colleague friends. People who I just truly enjoyed being around, people who I look forward to seeing at conferences and going out to eat with, people who I shared belly laughs with, people who I enjoyed talking with about non-academic topics, such as how our families were doing. And when it came to discussing families, Rob's love for Karen and Aiden always shone through. Rob was one of my very precious colleague friends. Rob's career was truly remarkable, particularly in terms of the many roles he played and how extraordinarily well he played them. First and foremost, he was an excellent scholar. His many books and articles have been cited over 5,000 times. He was an excellent editor. He saw the potential in poorly written articles and was willing to spend an extraordinary amount of time helping the authors improve the articles to make them publishable. He was a department chair and managed to get out of that position without being stoned by his faculty. He served several different prominent research and policy centers, some at the same time. He was a policy entrepreneur who advocated for high quality physical and economic development. I was so impressed, though not surprised, to learn that he had been credited with playing important roles in lobbying for a school of medicine, a new interstate highway, and a new stadium in southern Nevada. Rob's interests were in changing natures of urban, suburban, and regional areas in the US. In his work, he had a knack for identifying trends and coining new terms or phrases to capture the essence of those trends. He talked about boombergs, talked about megapolitan areas, and he talked about edgeless cities. His knack partially explains how he caught the attention of not only his peers, but reporters from both national and international news outlets. Few persons in our field have been quoted as frequently as Rob. He helped explain to the public changes that were happening in the spatial organization of their communities and why certain policies were important to promoting health and prosperity. I always wondered, how does he do it all? When does he sleep? Well, I found out when we were attending a conference in Los Angeles. We decided to play hooky, rent a car, and drive up to the coast to find a place to go surfing. When we arrived at the beach, Rob just laid down on a towel and immediately fell fast asleep, where he stayed for most of the afternoon. It might have been my boring conversation on the drive up, but I rather think he was just exhausted from all he was doing. Rob always had a vibrancy, a wonderful smile, a twinkle in his eyes. I will miss him dearly, and I send my best wishes to Karen and Aiden.
So as the drapes are being closed, I'm Chris Nelson. I'm oftentimes an expert witness in court, so I bring exhibits with me. And I'll go through my argument and go through the exhibits as well. I'm also nearsighted, so I take my glasses off so I can read what I wrote, as opposed to Rob Lang, who was farsighted. I think we've made a pretty good team overall. This is a little tricky. So it occurs to me that I probably, except for Karen, I probably have known Rob longer than anybody else in this room, having met with him in 1992. He was then at Fannie Mae Foundation, and I was at Georgia Tech. We both enjoyed golfing, and I like to say, have you ever seen a giraffe play golf? I have. His name is Rob Lang. With arms flying in one direction, legs in another, and his hips turning in positions that weren't possible humanly, he would eventually get to the green, and he would sink very long putts. In one occasion, he sank a 25-footer, a 20-footer, and a 35-footer from the edge of the green. Rob Lang had a better putting stroke at the time than another golfer called Tiger Woods. That's a metaphor for Rob's life. You wouldn't ever really know how he was going to end up on something until suddenly he nails something that's so logical, so sensible. So for example, when he was at Fannie Mae and I was at Georgia Tech, he called me one day and he said, Chris, what if I told you that 80% of all office jobs in this country were not in places, downtown, suburban centers, or edge cities, which were the new fad at the time. What would you call that, he asked me. Well, I don't know. I guess I would call it dispersed urbanization, peri-urban sprawl, discontinuous settlement, sprawl and steroids. That's the best I could come up with. Then Rob said something like, well, how about edgeless cities? Oh, nailed it. Now, that was a nice riff off of the book, the famous book at the time by Joel Garrow, Edge Cities, for those of you who know that book. Shortly after that book was published, my first evidence here, Edgeless Cities, published by Brookings. This was Rob's dissertation. Shortly after being published, he and Joel Garrow got into a very famous pissing match. Only trouble is that Rob had all the data, where all Joel had were anecdotes. So, I've got to show this here. At the end of the day, I figured out that what really edgeless cities were all about was that if you took all of the edge cities in the country that Joel Garrow identified and put them into a fifth of scotch, this is Rob's favorite blue label, Johnny Walker Blue Label, edge cities would account for just 1 of 25 ounces in a bottle of Blue Label scotch. The downtowns and suburban centers would account for another 4 ounces of the office jobs in this country. 80% of the office jobs in this country accounted for the rest of the fifth of Rob's favorite scotch. I'm just fumbling through papers because I'm going to add something else too a little later on. So Rob and I discovered that we were interested in going to Virginia Tech about the same time. Actually, we concocted this story. So Rob called me one day on the phone. I was at Georgia Tech, and he was walking the streets of Old Town Alexandria. He says, Chris, guess what? Well, what? I'm going to be interviewed to run a new research center at Virginia Tech in Old Town Alexandria. I said, well, that's interesting. I was being interviewed to start the Urban Affairs and Planning program for Virginia Tech at the same center. So we hatched a scheme. We said to Virginia Tech, I won't come unless you hire Rob. And Rob says, I won't come unless you hire Chris. So we both came together at the same time at Virginia Tech, and we had wonderful times. I don't sleep well either. So Rob and I would be at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, emailing each other back and forth. So about that time, Rob began looking at data. He always looks at data. But he was trying to find some new patterns of suburban settlement around the country. And I said to one day, well, what are you doing, Rob? You're in your office all this time, and you got stacks of paper, and you're looking at numbers. He says, I'm looking at a new phenomenon called boom burbs, which led to this book, also published by Brookings. It's about places like Henderson and North Las Vegas, very fast-growing suburban communities. And these were a new phenomenon. It turns out that they accounted for almost all of the rapid growth of suburban areas in this country. And there's only about 150 of them. Actually, I think even less than that. Then a little later on, we began talking about, well, we see these metropolitan areas merging together, creating their own economic and cultural and political dynamos. What do we call these things? By this point in time, I had given up trying to name phenomenon. So I said, Rob, what do we call these things? Well, he says, let's call them megapolitan areas. And that led to Megapolitan America, our book published about 2011. Now, it turns out there's only 23 of them. I can't find it offhand here. There's about 23 of them. And what's interesting is that places like Kansas City don't count. So I was in Kansas City giving a presentation one day, and somebody said, well, what would it take for us in Kansas City metropolitan area to be called megapolitan? I went back to Rob and I said, what would we charge to change our methods to include Kansas City? Well, the Kansas City people couldn't match our price. Then a little later on, when he was here, he and Dave Damore and Karen wrote a book called Blue Metro's Red States. Now, I think they began working on the book in, 2018 or thereabouts, maybe 19. But in 2018, think of the 5 southern Rocky Mountain states, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. In 2018, those 5 states had 3 Democratic senators. Fast forward to 2022, they have 8.5. Now, Arizona has 2, Nevada has 2, Colorado has 2, New Mexico has 2, and Utah has a half, called Mitt Romney. So I just retired from University of Arizona this past May, and there was a Festschrift that was published in my honor. Thank you very much. But there's a lot of the Festschrift is actually composed of Rob Lang's work. In fact, he's mentioned this, he's mentioned several times in this, and one article about boom burbs is dedicated to Rob. And lastly, back at Virginia Tech, our then new dean wanted to understand what made his faculty, Rob and me and others, what made us tick. Now, mind you, we didn't really want to know what made our dean tick. But we thought, so our dean said, well, he's going to bring in some experts, some people skills expert. This is the actual booklet that we got. This is not Rob's, this is mine. But you can almost look through this and, various exercises, and eventually the people skills expert came around to our table. We were the last one. And he said something like, well, Rob, I have never seen anybody with these metrics. You're an off-the-chart analyzer who becomes an off-the-chart persuader, who then becomes an off-the-chart leader as you pursue with laser-focused mission your objectives. You don't suffer fools, and above all, you see around corners. So let's remember our dear friend and colleague, Rob Lang, as someone who could see and then lead us around corners. Thank you. I don't always have props with my lectures.
Good afternoon. Karen, Aiden, it's so lovely to be here with both of you. I first met Rob Lang after he joined Brookings Mountains West during a trip to Washington, D.C., when Lindy Schumacher had sent me to learn more about how Brookings would be able to intertwine and assist with Nevada issues. Seated in the Metropolitan Center conference room next to Rob, he shared with me that he was instructed by Lindy to take care of me and learn about my work in the community. I also happened to be coming off a divorce at that time and admittedly looked like a fragile, lost little hamster. Rob dug right in, asking about my divorce. Oh yes, he did. How old are you? How long were you married? Are you dating now? What kind of condition are you in? And then followed up with startling divorce statistics for our region. Age group and gender, and mortality rates. I remember stoically looking at this man and thinking, we really hired this person? questionable self-awareness on sensitive topics, yes. Capable of small talk, yes. Incapable of appropriate small talk, potentially. He then went on to project how quickly I would bounce back. And the statistics for future partnership, comparing me to penguins and other species who mate for life, and my chances for future relationship success. This dissertation went on for 10 minutes until he saw me drifting off, sensing, of course, that I must be hungry and not disinterested. He said, "You want a roast beef sandwich?" In a nervous but certain tone, full of confidence. I said, "I'm a vegetarian." "Well, then I'll get 2 sandwiches for both of us." He responded and went off hurriedly. As he walked away, he said he'd be right back and to hang tight. "We'll be good," he said. He said, "I promised Lindy I'd take care of you, and I'm doing that. I'm getting it done." He said that, and he did some kind of like hand signal towards me. It was then, as I watched him walk away, I decided, he might fit for Las Vegas. And I could like this man, Rob Lang, acerbic, yet focused, quirky, somewhat kind and caring, and unpredictable in his own Rob Lang way. And as we would all come to find, no matter the topic, Rob Lang always had a success plan for every scenario. Over the years, as we've heard, from transportation to education to healthcare to federal competitiveness to governance reform to academic medicine, we came to regularly say to Rob, "Okay, Rob, what's the plan?" Rob would infiltrate us then with the issue's history, challenges, opportunities, solutions, and the deep positive impact on Nevada once those improvements and policy changes were made. As we just heard, Rob saw around corners and had no patience for politics and timelines. In fact, his finish line was behind everyone else's starting line. And sometimes others were not even interested in racing at all, making his issues even more exciting and sometimes slightly combative, as we've heard, as we all worked to create better ways to make Nevada a better place. One lesson we've all learned working with Rob is that change is hard, even when we all know we need it. Most of the change Rob introduced to Nevada was change some groups sometimes were not even thinking about, let alone aware they were against, until some of them were against it. He moved Nevada forward 50 to 100 years in less than the 13 years he was with us, with his clarity of ideas and brilliance, disrupting the status quo, in many cases, for the first time creating institutions and equality in places, systems that had never had existed before in our state. Rob's plans and practice of taking Nevada's needs have instilled an active culture of continuous community improvement where old legacies, playing hide the ball, we've always done it this way, old habits and sacred cows are now eroding as a protected species over what is now today becoming precedents and awarding and benefiting progress in people, a new expectation and way of thinking about ourselves we can all owe to Rob's tenacious example that yes, here, systems can evolve and positive change is possible. That wasn't always the case here. In the last few conversations I had with Rob, we talked about 2 general things. The 2021 legislative session was nearing its end, and we had passed 5 of 5 reform bills he led in crafting in higher education. A real breakthrough for our little Wiley group after 10 years of ardent work in this area. He was so happy, and Rob, let's be honest, was rarely happy, and content, and said that for the first time he really felt like we'd reached true momentum in changing the direction of higher education for better for Nevada. His plan worked. It was working. But most of our conversations, honestly, were filled with him talking about his deep love for and stories about Karen and Aiden, both of you. You were both steeped so far and deep in his marrow. and dare I say, his greatest plan and success. Listening to Rob talk about Karen and Aiden then, as he did so often throughout my friendship with him, reminded me that his true lasting success was not due to his brilliant mind and tenacious nature, but in his real ability to understand how we do all belong to each other. We can't go it alone. Everything he accomplished was because of both of you, Karen and Aiden. He loved you both so much. His life was affected by both of you on so many levels, and it then touched his ability to work for others and understand the consequences when families and communities went without or were left behind. He certainly touched all of us with his friendship, dedication, and yes, love. A coaching friend recently reminded me of a saying in sports that oftentimes the toughest teams to beat are the ones that love each other. That was certainly the case with our team, and Rob was our captain. He never let us give up or give in, and we believed in him and our plans until we got the W, and we captured a lot of them. Rob loved his work. We know that. He gave it reason and purpose, and we joined him in that journey for Nevada, and we loved him back and each other as we've dedicated ourselves on so many issues and continue to do so today. In the end, we're still working Rob's plans. There's so many more W's to capture, and we'll get them with Rob's plans and memory at our side, and that's how I think he's always planned it to be. Thank you.
Bill, when you stepped up here at the beginning of this celebration, and it immediately brought happiness and sadness, because I don't think I ever saw this stage without you and Rob on it together. I know he's here with us, and I'm looking at him right now, so that helps. I didn't think I'd be wearing a tie. I haven't worn one for 2.5 years, but I thought in Rob's honor I would, but I'm looking at Rob right now, and he does not have a tie on, so I'm sort of thinking of taking it off, but I won't, because out of respect for Rob, I can't do that. As we've all commented up here today, Rob will not be remembered as a quiet person. He's quite the opposite. In work and in life, Rob did never play checkers. He only played chess, and he was the grand master at chess. Any meeting I had with him, whether it was a casual lunch or breakfast or dinner, I received the equivalent of probably a semester of education that I had at Bowdoin College. I have never been so captivated. You know, lunch would be an hour and it would be 3 or 4 hours later, and I never said I had to go because it was a tremendous education. I did learn, however, that I should never ask him a question or his opinion during a Vegas Golden Knight game. As John and Bill and others who attended with Rob knows that you'd miss an entire period during which was quite long if Rob answered that question, and I enjoyed the game too much. We had a lot of fun at those games. That's probably not for discussion up here now, but John, Bill, and I, and of course Rob, had a lot of fun at the games. I don't know if he really liked hockey, John, but he went along for the ride, and we kept him there. But it's interesting because I would classify Rob as a secret weapon, an ace that you bring on. You know, having lived here at the time for 17 years, when I met Rob, which would have been 13 years ago, I've been here 30 years, I didn't ever imagine there'd be a force as great as Rob in this state. There were a lot of great men and women, great academics, great leaders. Actually, there weren't a lot, there were a few. There was a handful. But when Rob came on the scene, it's like, wow, this is our Mickey Mantle, this is Pele, this is Michael Jordan, this is like the real deal. This guy is gonna take us places. And I remember it was with Maureen, actually, at breakfast at the Four Seasons with the group that Maureen leads and has been leading for a dozen years or so, called the Council for a Better Nevada. And we were all stunned by the recession, and Maureen said, we have this great speaker. His name's Rob Lang. And Rob, we had breakfast, and then Rob went at it. And I said, wow, this guy, not only does he know his stuff, I was going to use another expletive, but I won't, but he took us on a journey with data, with vision, facts, and policy ideas that I think all of us in that room that day, I'm sure Maureen would agree, said, wow, this guy can make a difference. And boy, did he make a difference. Because everything he did, and as I'll repeat it again, was energy, passion, aggression, you name the adjective, but he did it with gusto, and his ideas were turned into actionable items, and there was impact like no definition of impact could describe. You'd have a picture of Rob under impact. That was him. But on the fun side of it, I grew up in the East Coast as Rob did. I was born in New Jersey like Rob, so we had an instant bond when he found that out. And that was just, East Coast, New Jersey boys. I went to Bowdoin, he went to Rutgers, kind of similar schools. I think we both wrestled, him a little shorter than I did. We had wrestling stories, Karen, you probably heard those too. We had fraternity stories, girl stories, all the fun stuff. So I got to know Rob on that level. It was really kind of fun. His girl stories weren't all that great, but he got the best, that is for sure. But one of the things we talked about, because I'm a bit of an older father, but when I had my son, who's 8 years younger than Aiden, we were both parents of a single child, and Rob gave me lots of great advice, Aiden, about what it's like to be a father to a single son. And my son and I have a bond like you and your dad will always have. And he guided me on a lot of the learning curves because a lot of my friends had kids that were already married and with families of their own. So it was really insightful, Aiden, to talk to your dad a lot about what it was like to be a dad. He went on into policy. We all know what he did. I went into the restaurant business, which I think he's grateful for because we have had so many meals together. Rob is a good eater. Even when he couldn't eat that well, he was a good eater. And I like good eaters. He knows that. So I'm going to keep it short because I know we're running on kind of low on time here. But and everything that's been said, I could just reiterate. All the friends of Rob's and fellow colleagues have said it all. But I am happy to report I got a message this morning. Mega Heaven is in a much better place today. It's received R1 status. There are no elevated highways in heaven, I'm happy to report. They did get light rail. They now have their first NFL football team because Rob got a stadium built. And of course, they've had a med school for a while. So thank you, Rob. Nevada is a better place for my son, for Aiden, for all of us, but I look at it as the next generation, like's been talked about. This is a better city for so many people, but I look at it for the younger ones, not only the young scholars in the room, but most importantly, Karen and Aiden and then my son and the next generation. So thank you. And there he is.
Well, good afternoon. It's not often in my life that I was ever called to back cleanup. The good news is there is absolutely nothing left to clean up. Everybody who spoke before me said everything I was going to say, but they said it much better than I could or would. So if I can take a page out of my old Senate job, I'm going to incorporate by reference all the speakers before me, which will save you about 20 minutes as best I can tell. So in listening to all the speakers, and Karen, you'll probably know this, I'm not sure, Aiden, you were old enough to even pay attention to what was going on at that time when your dad first got here. I would get these First of all, when I met Rob, I mean, it might have been 2 sentences into our meeting when we fell in love with each other. Of course, I think everybody believed that when they met Rob. I hate to find out I'm not alone. We fell in love for different reasons, I'm convinced. He knew he had in me, I will use the word, he would never use it, someone he could manipulate. Not that he would ever do that in his life. To do his will, because his will eventually would be my will. At least that's how he'd present it. And I fell in love with him because, like Tom said earlier, and you were exaggerating, there weren't even a handful of leaders in this town or this state who could bring people together or force people to come together the way I saw Rob would be able to do. And I saw in Rob the person who would change this state and this region in Southern Nevada and this university for the better in a matter of a couple of 2-3 years. That was in my head, which would have saved me 30 or 40 years, even if I had them. And so I love anybody who can come to Las Vegas or come to Nevada and make this state a better place. And I saw in Rob that person. So he didn't have to manipulate me. All he had to do was ask. The one thing I haven't heard throughout this, and maybe everyone was just being kind, is what happened when Rob got a little depressed or frustrated or down. I'm sure you never saw that, Karen. But I did. Maybe it's because we both liked eggs for breakfast, as best I could tell. The first time he reached out, he says, "We've got to talk." I said, "Sure, when do you want to do it?" He says, "Now." It was 10 o'clock at night or something. I said, "I'll meet you at the egg place." "What's the egg place?" Well, and I told him the address, where it was. "I'll meet you there at 7:30 in the morning." "How long do you think we'll take?" "An hour." "Okay." So I would meet him at the egg place. This happened a dozen, 2 dozen times easily, and at least half of those times, Bill Brown came along. And Bill never said anything. Bill, I think, was there to take notes. He knew I wouldn't remember, and he knew whatever, Rob said, he'd have to make sure Rob made good on at some point. So he was kind of there to keep him track, and, Rob would often turn to Bill, "Isn't that true, Bill?" "Yes," and then he kept going. But Bill liked to eat also. And so the egg place became our refuge. And what happened most of the time at the egg place? It would start off with Rob telling me his next vision, and I think I heard them all. And then he wouldn't complain. He would tell me about the obstacles in his way by name. And so the 1-hour breakfast turned into, as Tom and the others have said, 2, 3, 4-hour breakfast, because there were a lot of names. And I think I agreed with him on 98% of those names. I said, "Do you have a way around that?" He said, "Well, I thought you would." He said, "What am I doing? Why am I letting these little people get in my way and getting in Nevada's way to becoming a state that leads the nation, not one that follows? We need a highway." This is long before we ever were even close to a highway, I-11. "We need professional football. We need a medical school." Whatever all that stuff was, we've all heard it today, and there's more. We need to do this, and we need to do it. We need to do it now. Now could be a 2 or 3 or 4-year plan. So he'd say, "I'm not going to suffer," as someone said, "I'm not going to suffer these fools. I'm from New Jersey. I'm a Rutgers boy. I know what to do." So together we'd then come up with 2 or 3 names, people in high and low places, and Rob would take it on himself to go out and meet and manipulate them. And soon the hurdles would go away, and Rob would get where he needs to go. I field a ton of phone calls during Rob's presence here. Most of them were unpleasant, and all of them ended the same way. "This is the happiest phone call I've ever had. Rob's doing a great job. Thank you very much." they couldn't believe that one man could be such a force of nature and such a force for change. Aiden, we don't control our time here. We don't know how long we have. All we can do is use that time to make life better for the people around us. Your dad loved being here. I mean, there were a few times, I'm sure you know, that he had opportunities. And sometimes they came at very low points in his existence here. But he didn't take them because he loved here and he loved the challenge. But as we celebrate Rob's life and what he did for this community, it's my view that we're going to be celebrating for generations to come. And so regardless of whose name, as I think John said, is on the outside of the building, we all know whose name is on the inside of this building, on the inside of this town and this state, because we are going to live and grow on what Rob started, on what Rob accomplished, and what he left for others in this room to continue. And that, my friend, my young friend and Karen, is worth celebrating. Thank you.
Well, I want to just say, I wasn't expecting to speak actually, but I am just so overwhelmed by people's outpouring of affection and all of the, I don't know, I couldn't believe the response after he died. I mean, the governor called me personally. It was just crazy. So I just wanted to let people know a couple of things about him personally, since I'm probably the person that knew him the longest, other than his brother and sister. But he always told me from day one that he was a consummate urbanist. One of the things he used to do as a kid, he would build styrofoam cities, right? And then he would burn them. And then he would rebuild them and start all over again. I think he liked to watch them melt. I don't know what it was. But anyway, so when I met him, we met in a fraternity at Rutgers. And I just want to say that there were two incidents in our life together that almost didn't have him come here. The night I met him was one of them, because I go to walk up the stairs to this frat house. It was dark. It was a co-ed fraternity, by the way. And it was dark. It was like, well, I don't know what's going on. So I almost didn't go in that door to meet him. All right. So when I went into the frat house and someone came to the door finally, you cannot imagine the sight he was to behold. He was like a hippie preppy. So he was wearing like a cashmere sweater and had hair out to here like they did in the 70s and a mustache. I don't know exactly what attracted me to him at first, other than the fact that once he started talking, he was such a storyteller, or whatever you want to call it. He was spellbinding. I would come by every single day because I just could not get enough of listening to him talk. Didn't end till the day he died, obviously, but I think I've told a lot of you this story anyway, and just to show how the arc of, one last thing, that cities were his love, but I always thought that politics kind of was his mistress, because he just loved dabbling in that. Oh, and I didn't talk about the second thing. I was the one that actually came to Washington first, and he always dreamed of being associated with the Brookings Institution, I have to say. That was one of his, dreams of his life that he wanted to do. And so my mentor had actually gotten me a job from Rutgers down to Fannie Mae down in Washington. And the day that I was going to move, because he was still staying behind to finish his degree, he almost stopped me from going. He said, "Don't go. I don't want you to go." So he almost didn't, so unless I went to Washington, you would all never have met him, and he would have never had the career that he had. So I'm taking some credit here, sorry. So anyway, but I want to end with the story of the last day of his life to just show how much he was an urbanist. Like a couple hours before he died, he wakes up and he says, "Can you point my head towards New York?" And I looked at him funny. I said, "What are you talking about?" And he goes to me, "Point my head towards New York." And I said, "Well, tell me why." He goes, "Because I gotta go get up and fix New York, right? And I said, I can't do that. You know, you'll be in the bed the wrong direction. And then he said, well, all right, point me north. I said, why? And then he goes, I need to fix Chicago. And that was the last thing he said. Those were his last words. He didn't say goodbye, and that was it. He was saying goodbye to cities and how he was still raring to go to fix them till the day he died. So thank you all for all of the very nice things you said and for putting this together and, for having such kind words about Robert. Thank you.
We're gonna get you out of here in just a minute, but I wanted to close by saying a couple things. I didn't know what to really expect today, but of course you all exceeded any expectations. What I really didn't expect was to be psychoanalyzed by two political science professors. So, can you help me out here, President Whitfield? I mean, don't these guys have day jobs? So, the other thing in closing, I mentioned how it was almost 13 years ago to the day we had that reception out there. And we came inside to hear some talks from some Brookings guys. One of them, of course, was Rob Lang, who gave a talk called Metropolitan Las Vegas, Challenges, Opportunities, and a Vision. Well, how about that? The only thing that has changed are the challenges and the opportunities. But fortunately, we have a vision. And I would beg all of you to do what you've done so often for us, and that is to help us and guide us as we try and continue to fulfill Rob's vision. And with that, I strongly urge you to do whatever you can to get a cookie before me. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your time and your thoughts with us. And I wanted to say there's not much more to say, but I know we all have stories we will now share off the mic. So please, join us out front.